The Lord of Karma, Saturn, is entering the sign of its fall, Aries, on Saturday, May 24th, introducing us to a major 3-year-long chapter that will offer opportunities for personal growth and development and carry dangers of reckless actions, forceful behavior, and paralyzing fears. I am here to help you make the best of it and break it down for all 12 signs. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive readings. I enjoy creating content for you guys, and I like seeing your support in the shape of likes, comments, subscriptions, and when you press the notification bell, that also really helps so you can see my content when it comes up. You can watch more of my videos. That's another way of showing your appreciation, or say thank you by buying me a tea, a coffee, a croissant. Any token of love is very much welcome here. Before we dive in, if you'd like personal readings, if you want to ask me questions, have a face-to-face conversation where I look at your chart and break it down specific to you versus these tend to be a bit more general readings, book it at anastasiadoesastrology.com. There are a few options. I do relationship consultations, predictive readings, solar return, great to do around your birthday, natal chart reading, electional astrology to help you pick the right moment to start a project, get married, start a business, or astrocartography, which is all about relocating, finding the best places in the world to move to. On my website, you can also find a variety of products I create. Since today we're talking about Saturn in the sign of its fall, for the next 2.5, 3 years, Saturn will struggle. I highly recommend my Empowered Saturn in Aquarius candle. This one captures Saturn in the sign of rulership. It was created in 2023 when Saturn was in Aquarius, Venus was in Aquarius. So there is this harmonious, charming, pleasant energy to the otherwise disciplined, difficult, and harsh Saturn. It smells like sweet tobacco, so it sort of reminds you of like what Saturn might smell like in the shape of an old grandfather. And it brings rewards, mastery, and recognition. Highly recommend for everyone for the next 3 years, but extra, this is like really good if your natal Saturn is in Aries, because this is your Saturn return, and Saturn is in the sign of its fall, or if it's in the sign of Cancer or Leo, which are the signs of detriment for Saturn. So this is on my website, and like I said, I made these in 2023. I still have a few left, but they're selling out pretty fast, so check it out today. And sign up for my natal astrology course, Blueprint of the Soul. This is the language that you're so interested in because you're watching a lot of videos. So why not learn to speak it? Why not learn to interpret it and give readings to yourself and help people around you, connect with people around you better? Astrology is awesome. So take that next step, start studying. All of that is on my website too. So thank you for listening. Today we're talking about Saturn in Aries, right? And this concept of Saturn being in its fall is quite significant. I might make quite a few videos on Saturn and Aries because Saturn will be conjoining Neptune. It's not just like Saturn and Aries. There's going to be a lot going on. And Saturn enters Aries on May 25th, leaves on September 1st, comes back on February 13th, 2026, and then again stays all the way until April 2028. This year it only makes it approximately to like 1 degree, so you're not likely going to feel it very strongly unless you have planets at 1 degree, Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra, which are our cardinal signs. Sorry, I'm just checking. Yeah, it gets up to 2 degrees Aries, but like very much like right at like 2 degrees. It doesn't go too far. So if you have planets between like 0 and 2, Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, this will be really, really strong for you. So what is Saturn? Saturn is our last visible planet. It represents the boundary between the visible and invisible realm in real life. And in astrology, it represents boundaries and thresholds. So oftentimes Saturn is the boundary between youth and old age, the boundary between life and death, the boundary between wealth and poverty, right? So Saturn represents limits and endings and things that we tend to not enjoy in life. That's why Saturn gets so much bad rep, and people are afraid of Saturn, because when Saturn comes in, it brings harsh realizations, makes you face reality. And most of us do not like to transition into situations that are maybe more difficult than we're in right now. However, Saturn is also the planet that protects you, that creates situations that can help you. It is the planet of mastery and commitment, right? Whenever we have sort of strong Saturnian transits, it can also mean like getting married or having a child. I just had a friend actually get married today, and I'm filming this on the day of Venus in Pisces conjoining Saturn. So it's a very, Venus and Saturn together equals marriage. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. We've had Saturn in Capricorn and Aquarius from 2018 until 2020, early 2023. Now Saturn is going into Aries, which is the sign ruled by Mars. And Mars is the warrior. Mars is brave. Mars is about taking action, following desires, acting independently. So, and Mars in Aries is extra young, right? It's a young, masculine version of Mars. It's about going after things in a fast way. It's impatient. It dives head first into things. It likes being first. It likes doing a lot. It likes being sort of seen in this like heroic type of way. And so Saturn is considered in its fall in Aries because the nature of the sign is contrary to the nature of Saturn, right? Like Saturn really likes being in Libra, the sign opposite Aries. Saturn is exalted in Libra. And Libra is a sign that takes their time. So Saturn, being that planet of like, responsibilities and duties and hard work, likes Libra because Libra will make sure that everybody's happy. It will sort of take action in regards of what's right. It's kind of going to consider what's right for everyone, how the laws have changed, how things affect the community. Versus when Mars in Aries, it deals with that sort of impulsive, rational, reckless quality, which is uncomfortable for Mars. Uncomfortable for Saturn. So Saturn will always try to be Saturn, right? Like it will always trying to teach us, help us reach some kind of important goals, build our legacy, create things that are long lasting, but it will have to operate in the house of Mars. It will have to deal in martial ways, right? And how does Mars operate? It has a bunch of blades around. Everything is high speed. There may be like fireworks and everything is on fire. So Saturn just feels a little bit out of place. That's why, again, Saturn in Aquarius, which is Saturn in its home sign, could be the candle or the oil to go to when things feel chaotic. So before I say more about that, I also want to mention that this is Saturn return for people born in 37, from April 25, 1937 until October 17, 1937, January 14, 1938 until July 6, 1939, and September 22nd, 1939 until March 20, 1940. So between 1937 and 1940. For people born between March 3rd, 1967 and April 29th, 1969. And finally, the youngest ones are April 7th, 1996 until June 9th, 1998, and then October 25th, 98 until February 28th, 1999. So this is your Saturn return. I am going to make a separate video on Saturn returns, but if it is your Saturn return, know that for you, this is extra significant, and I believe Saturn return begins the moment Saturn enters the sign of your natal Saturn. So as Saturn being the planet of threshold and crossing through thresholds, this could be the time when you are going major changes. If this is your first Saturn return, if you were born in 96, 99, right, 98, you may experience the time of major life choices, like getting married, having children, quitting a job, starting a new career, right? Very important transitions. If you are 1967, 1969, and it's your second Saturn return, you're likely transitioning from being a cog in the work machine or being a sort of a regular member of the workforce to being someone who guides and inspires others potentially. So maybe switching a little bit more into retirement and structuring your work differently, or starting to spend more time with family, etc. And if you were born in 37 until 39, then oftentimes this like third Saturn return is an invitation to, because at this point we're talking about like getting closer and closer to death, right? Sorry, got distracted by my own eye. But like if you're older, right, this is kind of closeness to death, and so there is a sense of preparation for it. Maybe meditating, spirituality, trying to find ways to give back to your community, being sort of an elder to your family. So there might be a little bit more preparation in that regard. So what happens when Saturn enters Aries, and why do we consider it a sign of its fall? One of the things that can happen is excitement, Arian excitement. It's the sign of spring, it's the sign of new beginnings over responsibilities. So if you're born with Saturn in Aries, and for the rest of us going through this transit, there will be a danger of like overcommitting, saying yes to things that you don't have a time to do, maybe getting excited about reaching some kind of position of authority, right? Like Saturn and Aries people often have kids really young, and they want to they start businesses really young, because in their head, they're almost like late to the party when they're in their 20s, because they're like, I'm supposed to be here already, I'm late, right? So there might be a tendency to sort of get excited about these responsibilities, but you have to be careful, because you may not have the time to accomplish everything you set out to accomplish. So the remedy here, the cure here, is to breathe deeply and make sure you're not saying yes to things that you do not physically have time to take care of. There may also be a tendency to say yes too soon, to overestimate your powers, and to not make good on all of the promises that you have delivered. You may feel exhausted, you may feel more burnt out because of that sort of enthusiasm. So these are the dangers for sure. I think sometimes this shows up in, Aries is the sign of exaltation of the sun. So it's the sign of like the sun is coming back, the spring is in the air, new beginnings. And so Saturn can get excited by that, right? Like I said, which can also be like danger of overdoing it. But at the same time, because Saturn is excited about the solar topics, there could be this excitement and focus to start new things, to show up as a hero, to be visible and active, right? So it's like Saturn is infused with Aryan quality. However, the sun can be too Saturnine, right? Like it's like either Sun is strong and Saturn is excited, or Saturn is strong and the Sun is darkened, because Saturn can very much darken the enthusiasm of the Sun. And so here we begin to deal with fears. We begin to deal with insecurities, like a doubt whether we can start the project. Sometimes Saturn in Aries can be like stuck and feel stagnant and feel impotent on many levels. It doesn't have to be literal, although it might be for like your partner maybe struggling with something like that. I would say especially for my, sorry guys, for my Libra risings and for Sagittarius risings, because Saturn is going, maybe for Sag risings even more, because for Sag risings it's going in the house of sex. So there might be some type of like, not necessarily literal impotence of your partner, but maybe a sense of like dry spell. Things are just drying out. And for Libra risings, it's going in the house of relationships. So there might also be a sense of like partner going through some kind of hard time. It's not all going to be dark. Saturn in Aries can be very energetic when starting new things. Again, if you're leaning into the sun more, it's very dynamic. It's very fast sometimes when it sets its sight on something. It could be very courageous. It could be very sort of unafraid when it comes to taking action. So just make sure you're focusing on overcoming the obstacles, right? To be a true hero, one must overcome the obstacles. That is any hero's quest, any hero's journey. Another danger to watch out for is that Aries likes to often act alone and has maybe strong ego issues. So you may be having to realize where you're being too egocentric or too sort of childish and impulsive and selfish on many levels. So having to deal with that and maybe learning to be a part of a team a little bit more. Even though Saturn and Aries will enjoy acting alone and not being part of the team. But if you are part of the team, just make sure that you're not letting your ego get too far, get too much control over you. Since Saturn is coming into Aries and Neptune has been in Aries since March 30th, Saturn may act as a debunker, as a myth buster. It's going to come in and maybe in the Aries sector of your chart, something you've been excited about will get pressure tested and sort of checked against the real life of Saturn, or real concerns of Saturn. There may be a sense of disappointment and disillusionment in the authority figures. Think Wizard of Oz, someone who looked magical and like a great leader figure, someone potentially getting like falling down. What's interesting is Martin Luther King was murdered when Saturn was in Aries back in that was the 1967-69 period. So yeah, the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. So that's like the more negative side, right? Like the heroes falling down because they get murdered. But it can also be the disillusionment of our disillusionment with the heroes. And what's interesting too, between 67 and 69 was the first human landing on the moon. So here you get the heroic sign of Saturn, like how much time does it take to send a human to the moon? How much effort, how many days and months and years of work, right? And the competitiveness that existed between the USSR and the US to make it happen. This is your Saturn in action, right? Making sort of major thing happen. Yeah, so those are the main things. I also looked a little bit at the history of Saturn in Aries. Patrick Watson did a whole like study on Saturn and Aries in relation with gun history. And so like there's been quite a few interesting developments. Like in 1908, the FBI was founded. In 1937, 1940 cycle of Saturn and Aries, that was the Federal Firearms Act was signed into law, which established the first gun licenses. So Saturn and guns, Aries and guns, of course, that will make a ton of sense. And of course, the 1940 period of Saturn and Aries was also the tensions surrounding World War II and all of the sort of tensions between Japan and China and Germany and Poland. And so not the best time in terms of wars. Hopefully no wars this time. When Saturn was in Aries in 67-69, the US Congress passed the Gun Control Act. There was also the law established what we now recognize as the, I'm quoting the Patrick Watson's website. It was saying the law established what we now recognize as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive was, yeah, so basically the law established that organization and banned certain types of people from being able to get guns. And then in 96, 98, again, when Saturn was in Aries, there were significant advances in gun control in the UK and Australia, and even the UN involvement. So we'll see, we'll see. There might be another development. I think in the US, in my opinion, is overdue for new gun regulations. I know people love their guns, and I'm not claiming to know what to do with guns. Like, I'm not a lawmaker, but I do think something needs to be done about like the school shootings and how sort of dangerous things can be here, because they shouldn't be that dangerous for children especially. So this is my take on Saturn and Aries in terms of general overview, right? Again, highly recommend Saturn and Aquarius. This is my go-to candle for the next 3 years, so pick one up. And book a reading at anastasiadoesastrology.com if you have any personal questions. So let's break it down for the 12 rising signs to give you kind of quick ideas on what this might be highlighting for you. If you are an Aries rising, Saturn is entering your first house on March 30th. Neptune came in here. You may already feel a sense of inspiration, a sense of like fresh new energy. Neptune could have ignited your desire to become a hero, to shine, to be more visible, perhaps to do work that is altruistic or creative. Saturn coming here will make it clear what is realistic, what is not. It may increase pressures on your time. It may suggest that you're undertaking some kind of really big project. You may have just started a new job. You may have just had a child. You may have just gotten married or, taking on a family member that you need to help out. So Saturn in the first is very much the time when like there is not enough time in the day, not enough hours in the day. It may put pressure on your health, so do your best to take really good care of yourself. Saturn rules joints and bones and ligaments and teeth, and in Aries, it's connected to the head and headaches. So treat yourself really well, drink water, and make sure that you're making healthy choices. And I'd recommend start sooner. A great way to remediate Saturn is I have Saturn in Aquarius candle, which is Saturn in rulership. And that's a great way to like attune to it, to a healthier, slower moving Saturn. Because with Saturn in Aries, you may just get so bombarded with things. And at first you feel excited because it's a new responsibility that can eventually maybe bring you more recognition, more satisfaction. But in the long run, it may turn into burnout. So Saturn in Aquarius is a really great candle for that. I would also really recommend doing Saturn rituals on Saturdays because it's the day of Saturn. Volunteering, helping people in need, donating some money if you can, specifically older, poor, sick people. That could be a good way to like connect with Saturn. If you seek more, visit anastasiadoesastrology.com to book your personal reading and join my natal astrology course to learn to speak the language of astrology and be your own astrologer, able to predict the trends, surf the waves of astrology and make the best of what's coming up. Find it on my website. If you are a Taurus rising, Saturn is entering your 12th house. So we've had Neptune come here in late March. Neptune in the 12th house could have activated your spider senses. It could have encouraged new spiritual pursuits, maybe your intuition, maybe your dreams. There could have been like a desire to get away or start a spiritual project, like start your own yoga school or become a Reiki healer. And now that Saturn comes here, it will create a sense of like what's feasible, what's not, what is a pipe dream versus what is a real achievable, tangible goal. And so Saturn will sort of get rid of the clutter. Saturn in the 12th house is very much the years in which you are completing some important cycles in your life. And it could highlight, it could sort of, Saturn actually likes being in the 12th house. It's Saturn's house joy. So in that way, this could be really helpful for healing your self-defeating tendencies. So 12th house classically is the place of blind spots and fears and bad habits that we have that maybe we're not aware of. So with Saturn coming here, all of your a tendency maybe to scroll at night and struggle with sleep, or a tendency to have friends that maybe don't treat you well, or a tendency to drink a bit too much. So it may illuminate all of those portions of your life. Even in 12th house, we are talking about like, inherited from childhood things like your patterns of behavior that you've observed your parents promoting. or maybe even old flings or old passions, old relationships that you're still kind of holding on to in the back of your mind. It may also be a really good transit to commit to your spirituality, to start doing yoga, to start meditating, to maybe take a yoga course or a Reiki course or anything to kind of like soothe yourself as much as you can. I highly recommend my Saturn in Aquarius candle as a remedy for this transit, because this is Saturn in the sign of rulership, co-present with Venus, created back in 2023. And this could be helpful during the next 3 years. Find it at anastasia.astrology.com. On there, you can also book a personal reading and join my natal astrology course to learn to speak the language of the stars, to become your personal astrologer, and to learn how to live life more successfully. When you're more attuned with what's going on, you're more likely to jump on the perfect opportunity and avoid the more difficult one. For the lovely Gemini rising, Saturn is entering your 11th house. This is the time of important realizations about friendships, about your networks, and about your dreams. The last 2 months, Neptune has been here. And Neptune is dreamy. So Neptune could have boosted all of your dreams. It could have brought these unique visions that maybe were a little bit foggy and unclear, of being a hero of your community, or teaching, guiding, connecting with other people, some kind of exciting developments in terms of your role in the world. Saturn comes in and it immediately sees what's realistic and what's not realistic. So Saturn can be like a reality check, a little bit like a cold water bucket dropped over you, where you have to be serious and realistic. It can, like I said, be the time when you realize that certain friendships have been dragging you down and they're really toxic and it's time to let them go. There might also be a bit of a separation between you and your friends, because maybe you're moving or you just had a child and you can't see them as much. A sense of focus on your role for community, like you may sort of feel like a strong desire to help the world somehow, right? Like when Saturn is in your 11th house, you may find yourself getting involved in protests and speaking up about some important issues on social media, connecting with other people, right? Feeling a sense of responsibility for helping your community somehow. I did a reading for an actress once, and she had Saturn transiting her 11th house, and she was very focused on like creating rehearsal spaces for actors, because apparently where she was from, it was very difficult to do that. So as Saturn reveals maybe some dark spots on your dreams, it can also make you work through the difficulty and actually get closer to your vision. I really recommend my Saturn in Aquarius candle for the next 3 years, because this is Saturn in the sign of rulership, co-present with Venus, and it can help you navigate the hardships and the challenges with more discernment and discipline. Find it on my website. You can also book a reading on there to talk to me face to face, and sign up for my natal astrology course to learn the language of the signs and planets and make better choices in life, be more successful. For the beautiful Cancer rising, Saturn is entering your 10th house. All about career, status, reputation, your public life. And so we've had Neptune here since March 30th. It could have ignited new visions, but maybe created a sense of uncertainty, right? Like Neptune is always like, I wish things were different, but maybe I'm not going to do anything because I don't know what to do, right? And Saturn comes in and it's like, there is no time. Got to do stuff. You can't keep wasting time. So Saturn in the 10th could be the time when sort of illusions fall off and what's realistic becomes more apparent. Of course, Saturn in the 10th can show up in a more negative way, where maybe you realize that the work you've been doing is not fulfilling for you anymore. There may be delays with getting a promotion or getting towards that next new step that you've been dreaming about. There may also be a tendency of overload, overwhelm, burnout, maybe bosses taking advantage of you. So if any of that is happening, think of like, what can you do, right? Like what actions can you take to get rid of some burdens, to clear space for new beginnings, to kind of commit to your vision, because Saturn in Aries ultimately wants to be a hero. And so any hero, as you know, for movies and tales and books, faces adversity, faces challenges. So this will be a really great opportunity to work through adversity and challenges and push through the blockages. Just don't expect it to come really fast, and watch out for taking on too much, because that's actually the danger of Saturn being in Aries, the sign of its fall. My choice for the next 3 years, a must-have, is this Saturn in Aquarius candle or oil. You can find it on my website. It captures Saturn in rulership. It can help you be more strategic, serious as you navigate hardship and difficulty, and ultimately come out on top. On my website, you can also book a reading and sign up for Natal Astrology Blueprint of the Soul course to get to know yourself better and to learn how to make best decisions so your life is at its most brightest capacity. For the beautiful Leo rising, Saturn is finally leaving your 8th house. Woohoo! Granted, only until September 1st, and then it will temporarily come back to your 8th house, but it's beginning its departure already. So Saturn is entering your 9th. You've had Neptune come here on March 30th. Neptune in the 9th could have encouraged you to dream. And 9th house is all about expansion and adventure and going into new directions. So Neptune here maybe brought new visions of studying or teaching, traveling, being a lawyer, being a published author. Saturn comes in, and Saturn is like, light gets turned on, right? Or like a cold bucket gets dropped over your head. So Saturn is realistic. It's going to make it clear for you what you can do versus what you cannot do. Saturn in the 9th is also suggestive of a major commitment to education. Oftentimes, Saturn coming in the 9th means someone is taking a course of study that will potentially last as long as Saturn's whole transit, so 3 years. It could be the time you're writing your dissertation, you're maybe working as a teacher and working on getting a raise, or you're working as a lawyer and also trying to sort of promote your career. Of course, Saturn can suggest delays, and in Aries especially, it can emphasize Saturnian qualities of like fears and self-doubt and uncertainty and somewhat like lack of action. You may deal with difficult authority figures like teachers, publishers, lawyers. Travel may get delayed, right? Or become a bit more labor heavy or responsibility heavy, like you're traveling to see your ailing grandparent instead of just traveling for fun. However, Saturn in the 9th is going to offer you a chance to review your beliefs and to maybe commit to a happier version of reality, commit to sort of happy thoughts and work through the darker beliefs that you have, and so that you can overcome the difficult transits, even difficult people sometimes. Don't let difficult people get you down, and keep working through it, keep following your dreams, just get clear on what those dreams are. I highly, highly recommend my Saturn in Aquarius candle, because Saturn in Aries is in its fall. So the danger lies in overcommitting, overdoing, not having enough time, burnout. Saturn in Aquarius is Saturn in rulership. For you, it falls in the house of relationships, so it can actually help your relationships. That's another thing too. Saturn going into the sign of into Aries, being the ruler of your house of relationships, may suggest that your partner is going to begin some kind of more difficult period in their life. Like the ruler of the house of relationships is going into the sign of its fall. So Saturn in Aquarius is a strong Saturn, and I have candles and oils for that, which could be a really good remediation. Find it at Anastasia.astrology.com. On there, you can also book a personal reading and sign up for my Natal Astrology Blueprint of the Soul course. Begins in September and can be a great platform for you to learn more about yourself, astrology, and learn to make successful choices. Moving on to Virgo rising, Saturn is entering your 8th house. So Neptune has entered your 8th house on March 30th. How has that been? It could have brought maybe some visions and an increased interest in mysteries, astrology, tarot, things like that. It maybe brought some feelings that you haven't processed. So as Saturn comes into your 8th house, it very much will encourage you to deal with any feelings and any fears. It may be the time when you're committing to your interest in spirituality, astrology, tarot, and you're beginning to learn about it. 8th house is the place of transformations. It's the place of healing. So healing childhood wounds, becoming more kind of aware of your dynamics with other people is very much the topic of the 8th house. 8th house is also the place where we share energy, money, resources with other people. So when Saturn comes here, there may be a sense that your dynamics with other people feel extra heavy, whether it is because you owe money and you're trying to pay it off, you're trying to clear a debt, or because you just had a child and you have to rely on your spouse to take care of you, so you're like in this position of dependency, or you find yourself taking care of your partner because your partner goes through some kind of hardship. 8th house is your partner's money, right? It's your partner's resources. So sometimes Saturn coming here, it can very much suggest that your partner's finances maybe at first dip down, but then ultimately they can actually improve if the partner is working through it. So all of these questions of like dependencies, for some people it will be financial debt. For many others, it's going to be something completely different, like relying on your mother to help you even though your relationship is toxic, being unable to set out boundaries and speak up for yourself. So opportunities to sort of clear all of these connections, separate your money from other people, separate your beliefs from other people, or even commit to new relationships that are healthy and strong are highlighted here. And I highly recommend my Saturn in Aquarius candle as a remedy measure, because Saturn is in its fall in Aries. There is a tendency to be reckless, impatient, overdoing responsibilities, getting burned out. This is Saturn in rulership, and it's really great for being slow, steady, diligent, and successful. Find it at anastasiadoesastrology.com. On there, you can also book a reading and register for my natal astrology course. It begins in September, and you can learn more about yourself, people in your life, make better choices, and find healthier relationships. My beautiful, beautiful Libra rising, Saturn is entering your 7th house. So this year between May 24th, September 1st, next year for 2 whole years. Neptune has entered your 7th house already in late March. How has that been feeling? It could have suggested that you've been feeling a little bit more dreamy, more romantic, maybe more forgiving and accepting, and like dreaming of commitment and new relationships. As Saturn comes here, it makes you more realistic, more grounded, more reasonable. It can take the rose-colored glasses off if you've been too accepting of a toxic partner. Saturn in the 7th is not the easiest transit. Let's be honest, right? It can be the time when you are getting clear that the relationship you've been in is ultimately not long-term potential, right? You've been with someone who maybe doesn't want kids and you want kids, and so Saturn comes here and rose-colored glasses come off, and you need to say no. You need to end the relationship. If you're single, Saturn in the 7th can put pressure on finding the right person and encourage you to commit. So Saturn in the 7th can be the time of commitment as well in an existing relationship, because Saturn always says no. And so in the 7th house, it can say no to a single person's life. So it can be about commitments. It can be about starting partnerships, signing contracts, welcoming new business partners, new sort of client base into your life. It could put pressure on your partner's life, because this is like for Aries rising for themselves. For you, it's for partners, and like what's happening with the partner's health, what's happening with the partner's job, what's happening in partner's life. So there might be some type of like pressure, physical ailment, work situation that they're dealing with that through putting strain on them, automatically puts a strain on your relationships. So the important question is like, what is worth committing to? What is worth fighting for? Where can you compromise a little bit versus where do you need to choose yourself maybe and remove yourself from situation? Share how this resonates. And if you're seeking more guidance, you can book a reading at anastasiadoesastrology.com. On there, you can also sign up for my Natal Astrology Blueprint of the Soul course to maximize the knowledge of astrology to help you live a more successful life. And Saturn in Aquarius is my remedy for the next 3 years because Saturn will be in the sign of its fall. And so if you want to smooth out a little bit of that drama in your relationships, this is the choice. My beautiful Scorpio rising, Saturn is entering your 6th house. So Neptune has entered first on March 30th. It could have maybe encouraged you, like Neptune here could have either made you a little bit more lazy, or maybe it highlighted your desire for work that is more free-flowing and allows you more rest time, or work that heals other people and empowers other people. Neptune here could have been like, I want to be a hero, but I don't quite know what to do. Saturn will know. Saturn will have answers, right? So Saturn comes here and it kind of forces you to deal with things you didn't deal with before. So this could be about health. This could be about health issues that have been bothering you quietly and you haven't been doing anything. And so Saturn comes in and you start exercising or you start doing yoga. Highly, highly recommend. I also would recommend my Saturn in Aquarius candle because this is Saturn in rulership. It's on my website. And volunteering every Saturday, the day of Saturn, doing things to help poor, sick, elderly, underprivileged people could be really good for like avoiding the more darker manifestations of Saturn in the 6th, because Saturn in the 6th can represent more headaches. It's Saturn in Aries. Aries rules the head. Dental issues, skin issues, joints, back pain, things like that. So start now. Start by really sort of doubling down on your health. Take really good care of yourself because Saturn in the 6th, especially if you are past 30 and up, right? Chances are higher that like things will start to ache. And so Saturn in the 6th is like commitment to yourself and your health. It may suggest that at work, you're kind of finding yourself in a position of like doing a lot of grinding and just dealing with the minutiae of life and struggling, and so taking responsibility for the work that you're doing and figuring out what to commit to versus what to say no to. For some of you, like, I'm a Libra rising, finishing Saturn in my 6th house right now. I found yoga to a point that I got my yoga teacher training last year. So this could be the time when you are so committed to health topics. You become a nurse, you become a dietitian, you take a course on helping with, like, become a lactation specialist if you just had a child and went through breastfeeding. It could be a lot of different possibilities, but Saturn will very much make sure that it's like interesting to you. If you want more guidance, book a reading at anastasiadoesastrology.com and sign up for Natal Astrology Blueprint of the Soul course. It lasts 3 months, begins in September, and it could be a perfect introduction to the world of astrology. Even if you know a little bit about astrology already, this will help systematize your knowledge, help organize it, and help you take advantage of the mysterious language of the stars. If you are a Sagittarius rising, Saturn is entering your 5th house. Neptune has entered your 5th house on March 30th, and Neptune alone could have created the sense of longing for perfect romance or longing for pleasure and adventure. It could have made you a little bit relaxed about how much you drink, how much you eat. Just sort of like go with the flow. Saturn is very different, right? Saturn is straight to the point, realistic, grounded. So Saturn comes here and you realize where you're maybe overindulging and you need to cut that off. You're realizing which relationships are unhealthy and don't have any sort of future potential, and maybe you cut those relationships off. Saturn in the fifth house being the house of pleasure and sex, can create some kind of sex issues or a lack of sex or sexual dysfunction, right? Sometimes Saturn enters the fifth and you realize that your ex gave you some kind of disease that you now need to deal with. Don't get scared. Just be careful, right? Now that you're warned, you can be careful, use protection, all of that kind of stuff. It could be the time when you're just like dealing with a lot of responsibilities, right? Maybe it's because you just had a child. And so there's not a lot of time to go on dates or have sex or just do pleasant things. So again, Saturn is here to be like, put it in your schedule. Don't forget about pleasure. Don't forget about romance. Fifth house being the house of children may also represent your creative children, your spiritual projects, your business projects that you're committed to, that you need to be dedicated to. When Saturn was in my fifth house, I was very much like combining pleasure with work. I would go on my daily walks and every walk I would film an Instagram reel in order to stay relevant and to keep building my business. I do a little bit of that now, but I think the foundations were definitely placed at that point. So a good time to get clear on like what makes you happy and what is unhealthy, what you need to release and what you need to commit to. So enjoy, Sagittarius risings. If you need some help, Saturn in Aquarius is Saturn in the sign of rulership versus Saturn in Aries is in its fall. It struggles with impatience, recklessness, tendency to overestimate, over commit and get burnt out. Saturn in Aquarius is a lot more slow, steady, good at taking time and choosing which duties to take care of, and like good at sort of setting boundaries and things like that. For the next 3 years, this is really the must-have candle. Additionally, you can always book a reading. We can discuss it in person, or you can sign up for my natal astrology course to learn the language of the stars and learn how to live your best life. For the beautiful Capricorn rising, Saturn is entering your fourth house, the domain of home, family, living situation, comfort, security, past wounds, childhood. So Neptune has entered Aries first on March 30th. And Neptune could have brought a little bit of confusion when it comes to your property or when it comes to your family. It maybe brought a sense of self-sacrifice or acceptance, forgiveness in the family. As Saturn comes in, Saturn is a bit more pragmatic, a bit more rational and grounded and serious. So Saturn coming here may be like, okay, enough with self-sacrifice, enough with trying to save your brother who has a drinking problem and doesn't want to change. It can create this sort of sense that you need to say no to some things, that you need to clear the air, that you need to set better boundaries. Saturn can increase family responsibility, right? A grandparent is getting really old and needs to be moved into a retirement facility, and they're really leaning on you, so you may feel like there's a little bit more heaviness when it comes to family. And what's interesting, Jupiter is about to go into your house of relationships and square the Saturn, so it makes me wonder if like something that's happening in your relationship is contradictory to the demands your family places on you, or what's happening with your property that you're dealing with. Ultimately, Saturn just wants you to learn to rely on yourself and maybe kind of cut off toxic patterns in family, and maybe, yes, take care of people you love, but also figure out like a good way to take care of them so that you're not exhausted and drained and falling asleep at the door to your apartment. So it could be a really empowering transit, I think, if you are discerning. I highly recommend Saturn in Aquarius candle, because Saturn is your chart ruler and it's about to go into the sign of its fall for 3 years. Having your chart ruler in the sign of its fall may compromise your normal discernment. It may sort of encourage you to do too much, to take on too much, to get exhausted, burnt out. This is Saturn in rulership. This is strong Saturn, good at knowing when to say yes, when to say no, good at knowing how to handle duties, how to sort of protect themselves. Highly, highly recommend. Find it on my website. On there, you can also book a reading and sign up for a natal astrology course, which begins in September. It can teach you how to live your best life and how to use astrology to help you surf the waves of transits. For the beautiful Aquarius rising, Saturn, your chart ruler, is entering Aries, which is your third house. So there's the good and the bad to this transit, or the good and the more challenging, right? Saturn can bring the confusing Neptunian energy into focus. So Neptune has entered Aries back in late March. In your third house, it could have created a desire to start a business, start a blog, maybe learn something new, maybe begin a project with your siblings. It could have brought like a new inspirational idea. Saturn comes in and it's like, okay, this is a waste of time. This is not going to work out, versus this is actually possible. Let's commit to it. Saturn in the third suggests it could be the time you're writing a book, right? And a book could be a lot of other things. But like Saturn transits last 2.5 years. And so oftentimes to write a book, especially if it's your first one and you have a full-time job, it might take you 2.5 years. So Saturn creates like a heaviness, a pressure, like more pressure around your mental output, around ideas. So at your job, you may get promoted and now you're the idea person, you're the go-to person. You need to learn new software that takes a long time. You need to check, 5 times more emails that you've been used to. You're maybe supervising people. So it could be the time in which your schedule is just really, really under a lot of pressure. And Saturn is in its fall in Aries. So there's very much danger of saying yes to too many things, getting excited about trying to prove yourself. Do not hesitate to say no. And pick up my Saturn in Aquarius candle. This is Saturn in rulership in your sign. It's so discerning and good at figuring out which responsibilities to take care of, which ones not to, when to say no, when to say yes, how to set boundaries. This is my choice for the next 3 years. I also have oils. So try to, breathe and be discerning and make sure that you're not spreading yourself too thin, because chances are it will be difficult. And you may also find yourself realizing that some sibling dynamics are unhealthy or some neighbors are being difficult. So having to both like clear your head and take ownership of your own thoughts and your own schedule, and maybe deal with immediate environment and people that are draining or challenging is highlighted here. Book a reading at anastasiadoesastrology.com to know more, and sign up for Natal Astrology Blueprint of the Soul course to learn more about your chart and people in your life and how to use astrology to your advantage to live the best life you can live. Do that today. If you are a Pisces rising, Saturn is entering your second house of money, values, and self-worth on many levels. So we've had Neptune enter Aries on March 30th. Neptune is foggy, easygoing, go with the flow. So Neptune here could have encouraged you to be a little bit nonchalant when it comes to spending. Maybe you've been having new dreams about making money, or just sort of been a little bit more like go with the flow when it comes to finances. With Saturn coming here, Saturn will be realistic, pragmatic, and discerning, right? So if you've been spending a little bit more like chill, in a chill way, Saturn could be like, okay, now you need to focus on paying off your debt. Get serious. Stop buying video games or stop buying books. Go to the library, right? So some kind of like practical ways to solve financial issues. It could also highlight your sense of like lack of recognition or proper compensation at your job. Oftentimes Saturn makes us feel like we're not making enough or we don't have enough money, but it's quite rare for Saturn to take something away from you, like take a job away from you. More often it's that like inner sense of I need to be compensated better, or I need to be recognized more, or I need to be appreciated for my skills, and other people have not gotten the memo, right? So Saturn really wants you to work on your self-worth, on you being that person who loves yourself and recognizes yourself instead of relying on other people. By the way, I really recommend my Saturn in Aquarius candle for the next 3 years. This is Saturn in rulership. It's really good at being practical, grounded, and discerning, versus Saturn in Aries, which is the transit we're talking about, is a lot more reckless and rash and just sort of jumps into things and then figures it out later. So this could be a good choice for like kind of managing finances. And for some of you, Saturn entering Aries could be the time you're building your savings account, you're getting a mortgage, and there's like, you know, there's maybe a little bit less money available, but mainly because you have made the choice to invest it elsewhere. So it doesn't have to be the end of the world. Just be discerning when it comes to finances and watch out for the reckless decisions, which Aries is known for. Impulsive purchasing, right? Which maybe is something you're dealing with already, with Aries being your second house. To learn more, book a reading at anastasiadoesastrology.com and register for my natal astrology course to learn more about your chart, people in your life, build better relationships, and live life that is more authentic and successful. So the course begins in September. Thank you for watching and for listening. This is a really big transit. We have a few of them this year. Neptune was first, next Saturn, next Jupiter, next Uranus. So we'll keep talking about these major developments, and I appreciate you being with me, and hopefully I provided you with some insight. I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.